Welcome to Learn English with Sara. Today we'll learn English through a beautiful story that reminds us of how our weaknesses can sometimes become our greatest strengths. Listen carefully, enjoy the story, and learn new words as you go. Once upon a time, in a quiet little village surrounded by green hills, there lived a humble and hard-working farmer. Every morning, long before the sun rose, he would wake up, stretch his tired arms, and prepare for his daily journey. His small house stood far from the village well, so each day he walked a long distance to fetch water. Over his shoulders he carried a wooden stick, and at each end of the stick hung a clay pot. One of them was perfect, strong, smooth, and flawless. The other pot, however, had a small crack on one side. Every morning as the farmer walked home from the well, water slowly dripped from the cracked pot. By the time he reached his house, half of the water was gone. The perfect pot, proud of its strength and flawless body, often glanced at its companion with silent judgment. One morning, it could no longer hold back its arrogance. "Look at you," the perfect pot said softly but sharply. "You're broken. Half your water is gone before we even get home. I carry all my water safely every single day, but you, what good are you?" The cracked pot said nothing. It trembled slightly as it hung from the farmer's stick. Though it didn't speak, its heart was heavy with sadness. Every day after that, the same thing happened. The perfect pot teased. The cracked pot stayed silent. As the days turned into weeks, the little cracked pot began to feel more and more ashamed of itself. One morning, as the farmer was preparing to go to the well, the cracked pot couldn't hold its feelings any longer. Tiny drops of water rolled down its side, not from its crack this time, but from its tears. In a trembling voice, it whispered, "I'm so sorry." The farmer, surprised, looked at it gently and asked, "Why are you crying, my little friend?" "I'm crying," said the cracked pot softly, "because I'm broken. Every day I lose half the water you work so hard to carry. You never scold me, but I know I've been wasting your effort. I feel useless and ashamed. Please forgive me." The farmer smiled warmly. His voice was calm, full of kindness. "Oh, my dear pot," he said, "is that what has been making you so sad all this time? Don't worry. Tomorrow I will show you something. After that, you'll never feel useless again." The cracked pot didn't understand what the farmer meant, but it stayed silent. That night, as the moonlight touched the earth with silver light, the little pot thought about the farmer's words. For the first time in many days, it felt a small spark of hope. The next morning, the farmer lifted the same wooden stick, placed the two pots on each side, and walked to the well as usual. The air was cool and fresh, and birds sang in the trees. After filling both pots with clean water, he began the journey back home. But this time he said softly to the cracked pot, "Today I want you to look carefully at your side of the path." The cracked pot, curious, looked down. To its surprise, the dusty path that it had walked so many times before was now lined with colors, bright red, sunny yellow, and soft pink flowers dancing gently in the morning breeze. Their petals sparkled under the sunlight, and butterflies fluttered happily above them. The cracked pot was amazed. It had never noticed the flowers before. For the first time in a long while, it forgot its sadness. Its cracked sides glistened as it smiled silently, admiring the beauty around it. But when they finally reached the house, the little pot looked inside itself and saw that half the water was gone again. Its heart sank. Even after seeing those flowers, it whispered sadly, "I still failed you. I still couldn't bring you all the water." The farmer placed the pots down gently, then smiled with kindness in his eyes. "No, my little friend," he said softly. "You don't understand yet. Didn't you notice something? The flowers were only on your side of the path, not on the other pot's side." The cracked pot blinked in surprise. "Why are the flowers only on my side?" it asked quietly. The farmer's smile grew wider. "Because I have always known about your crack. Many months ago I planted flower seeds all along your side of the path. Every day as we walked home, you watered those seeds without even knowing it." The cracked pot listened in silence, stunned by the farmer's words. "You see," the farmer continued, his voice warm and patient, "every day as you dripped water along the path, those drops gave life to the flowers. They grew, blossomed, and now bring beauty and joy to everyone who passes by. You thought your crack made you useless, but it made you special. Without you, there would be no flowers." The little pot's cracked surface shimmered with emotion. For a long time it couldn't find any words to say. It simply looked down at the path now, realizing that every drop it had lost had not been wasted, it had created life. The shame it once carried began to fade, replaced by a deep, glowing happiness. From that day on, the cracked pot no longer felt broken. Each morning as the farmer lifted the wooden stick and began the walk to the well, the pot felt proud of the soft trickle of water that escaped through its crack. It no longer tried to hold back the water. Instead, it watched with joy as tiny drops fell and sparkled in the sunlight, knowing they were giving strength to the flowers that bloomed so brightly on its side of the road. The perfect pot, meanwhile, watched in silence. For many days it had felt superior, mocking its companion's flaws. But now, it began to notice the beauty that had grown because of the cracked pot's imperfection. Every day, travelers stopped along the path to admire the flowers. Some took a few home, while others smiled as they passed by, their hearts lightened by the sight. The perfect pot began to feel something unfamiliar, a quiet sense of humility. One afternoon, as the farmer rested under a large tree, both pots sat nearby in the shade. The cracked pot looked at the farmer with gratitude. "Thank you," it said softly. "If you hadn't believed in me, I would never have known that my weakness could be something beautiful." The farmer smiled and replied gently, "You see, my friend, everything in this world has its purpose. Sometimes what seems like a flaw is simply a different kind of gift. We just need someone to help us see it." The perfect pot finally spoke its tone, no longer sharp but thoughtful. "I've always been proud of being perfect," it said quietly. "But now I see that perfection isn't everything. You bring beauty to the world in a way I never could. I'm sorry for judging you." The cracked pot looked at it kindly. "Thank you," it said. "We both have our roles. You bring home a full pot of water for the farmer's family, and I water the flowers that make the world more beautiful. Together, we both help." The farmer chuckled softly, pleased with the harmony between his two companions. From then on, the three of them worked together each day in quiet understanding. The perfect pot continued to carry its full share of water, and the cracked pot continued to water the flowers that lined the road home. The path became even more beautiful as time passed, so full of life that villagers often came there just to walk, smile, and breathe in the scent of the blooms. Years went by. The farmer grew older, his steps slower, his hair silver like the moonlight. But every morning he still walked the same familiar path with his two faithful pots. The cracked pot's flowers continued to bloom brightly, filling the air with color and fragrance. Children often picked the blossoms to give to their mothers, and travelers rested beneath the shade, grateful for the beauty around them. One evening after a long day, the farmer placed both pots on the ground beside the well. The sun was setting, painting the sky with shades of orange and gold. He sat down and whispered softly, "Thank you, my friends. You have served me well all these years." The cracked pot, now worn and older, felt tears gather once more along its edges, but this time they were tears of joy. It looked at the path it had watered for so many years now, filled with hundreds of blooming flowers. Each petal seemed to shine like a memory of kindness and purpose. The farmer smiled at the sight. "You've shown me something very important," he said. "Life is not about being perfect. It's about finding meaning in our imperfections. Even a cracked pot can create beauty if it does its best." The wind rustled softly through the flowers as if agreeing, and in that golden light, the little cracked pot finally understood what it meant to be truly whole. As the days turned into months, the story of the cracked pot spread quietly through the village. Children loved to hear it before bedtime, and their parents smiled as they told it again and again, teaching them a lesson about kindness, humility, and the hidden beauty in imperfection. The farmer never sought praise for what he had done, but people began to notice how bright and colorful the road to his house was. Travelers who passed by often stopped to rest, touched by the beauty of the flowers that swayed gently in the morning light. One day a young boy from the village walked with the farmer to the well. He had often heard the story about the two pots and wanted to see them for himself. As they reached the well, the boy asked curiously, "Sir, why don't you get a new pot to replace the cracked one? It must be hard carrying something that always leaks." The farmer smiled, lifting both pots onto the stick and placing them across his shoulders. "You'll see soon," he said kindly. As they walked, the boy noticed how drops of water fell slowly from the cracked pot, leaving small shimmering marks on the dusty road. When they returned home, the farmer placed both pots down and said, "Look carefully at this path." The boy looked and gasped. The sides of the road were full of bright flowers, red, pink, yellow, and orange, all blooming happily in the sunlight. Bees buzzed from one blossom to another, and butterflies painted the air with color. The boy's eyes widened in surprise. "It's so beautiful," he said. "Did the cracked pot do this?" The farmer nodded with a gentle smile. "Yes," he replied softly. "Sometimes what seems like a flaw can create something wonderful. You see, every drop of water that fell from the cracked pot helped these flowers grow. It thought it was weak, but it gave life to something beautiful every single day." The boy thought for a moment and then asked quietly, "Does that mean it's better to be cracked than perfect?" The farmer chuckled softly. "Not better, just different. The perfect pot has its purpose, too. It brings home the water we need for cooking and drinking. The cracked one brings beauty to our path. Both are valuable. The world needs both kinds of pots." As they continued to talk, the sun dipped lower, casting a golden glow over the fields. The boy looked at the cracked pot again and smiled. "Then I think I'd rather be like that pot," he said shyly. "I want to do something that makes the world more beautiful." The farmer placed a kind hand on the boy's shoulder. "That's a good wish," he said warmly. "Remember, it's not about being perfect. It's about using what you have to make a difference." From that day on, the boy often helped the farmer carry water. He would talk to the pots as if they were old friends, encouraging the cracked one and admiring the perfect one. The farmer felt a quiet joy as he watched the next generation learn a lesson that had taken him years to understand. Seasons passed. The flowers bloomed every spring and danced through every summer. Even when the rains came, their colors stayed bright and cheerful. The cracked pot continued to leak, but it no longer felt broken. It knew its place in the world. The perfect pot, too, learned to appreciate its companion, understanding that perfection without purpose could be empty. Together, they served the farmer faithfully year after year. As time went on, the farmer grew very old. His steps became slower, his hands trembled, but he still carried the pots each morning. The cracked pot worried about him. "You've worked so hard for so long," it whispered one morning. "Why don't you rest and let someone else fetch the water for you?" The farmer smiled, his eyes filled with the kindness of a lifetime. "I will rest soon, my friend," he said. "But I still enjoy walking this path. It reminds me that even small things can make a difference. Every time I see these flowers, I'm reminded of you, and of how something imperfect can still create so much joy." The cracked pot didn't know what to say. It just listened to the gentle rhythm of the farmer's footsteps and felt proud to be part of something meaningful. It had spent its whole life dripping away, but not a single drop had been wasted. As the wind whispered softly through the flowers, the farmer's words stayed in the pot's heart. Even your flaws can water someone's garden. Years passed, and the seasons continued their gentle cycle. The farmer's house stood at the end of the most beautiful path in the village, a path that everyone admired. Whenever people walked by, they stopped to breathe in the scent of the flowers, and the air around them seemed lighter, filled with color and calm. One morning, the farmer woke before dawn, as he always did. The sky was painted with faint streaks of pink and gold. He stretched, took a deep breath, and looked at the two pots that had served him faithfully for so many years. Their colors had faded with time, and their surfaces were worn, but to him they were treasures, symbols of patience, humility, and quiet devotion. That day, as he lifted the stick and began his slow walk to the well, his steps were unsteady, but his heart was peaceful. The pots swayed gently on either side, the perfect one still strong and smooth, the cracked one still letting tiny drops of water fall with every step. The morning air was cool, and the soft trickle of water made a calm, rhythmic sound. When they reached the well, the farmer filled both pots carefully, as he always had. He looked at the reflection of the sunrise in the water and smiled. "How beautiful," he whispered. "Each day begins anew, just like life." Then, balancing the stick across his shoulders, he turned back toward home. The cracked pot, feeling the farmer's quiet mood, asked softly, "Farmer, are you tired?" He nodded with a small smile. "Yes, my friend. My body is old, but my heart is happy. I've had a good life, and I've learned from you more than you can imagine." The cracked pot was surprised. From me it asked, "But I was broken. You were the one who made my weakness into something useful." The farmer chuckled gently. "Ah, but you taught me that lesson first. You showed me that value doesn't come from perfection. It comes from purpose, from giving what you can even when you feel incomplete." They walked in silence for a while, the flowers glowing softly in the rising light. When they reached the house, the farmer placed both pots on the step, sat down beside them, and sighed peacefully. "I think it's time for me to rest," he said quietly. The cracked pot trembled slightly, not knowing what to say. "Will someone else carry us to the well?" it asked softly. The farmer looked out at the path where the flowers danced gently in the wind. "Perhaps," he said. "But even if no one does, the flowers will still bloom for a long time. You've watered the earth deeply. You've already left your gift behind." That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with fire and gold, the farmer closed his eyes in peace. The village later found him resting there beside his pots, a gentle smile on his face. They buried him near his house, right beside the road lined with the flowers he had loved so much. The cracked pot and the perfect pot stayed on the porch for many days, silent and still. The cracked pot felt sadness. It missed the farmer deeply. But as it looked out over the field of flowers, it remembered his words, "Even your flaws can water someone's garden." Not long after, a young woman from the village began to visit the house. She admired the flowers every time she passed by. One morning, she noticed the two pots sitting quietly and decided to take them home. She cleaned them carefully and used them to water her own small garden. The cracked pot felt alive again. Though its crack had widened a little with age, water still dripped out slowly as she walked. Soon, just like before, tiny green shoots began to appear along her path. The cracked pot felt a quiet joy knowing that the farmer's lesson and its purpose were continuing. Over the years, many people in the village began to tell the story of the farmer and his cracked pot. Parents told it to their children, teachers shared it in schools, and travelers carried it to faraway places. Everywhere the story went, people smiled, understanding its message that every flaw has value and every imperfection can bring something beautiful to the world. The cracked pot had once been ashamed of its weakness, but now it understood a simple truth: what we see as broken may, in fact, be the very thing that gives life to others. It had learned through years of quiet service that even the smallest act of giving could create beauty beyond imagination. And so, on quiet mornings when the sunlight touched the flowers and dew sparkled on their petals, it felt as if the farmer was still there walking that path, carrying his two pots, smiling gently at the world. As time went on, the little cracked pot became a symbol in the village of kindness, resilience, and the quiet beauty that grows from imperfection. People who felt discouraged or different would visit the flower path, sit beside the stream of colors, and feel comforted. It was as if the flowers whispered softly to them, reminding them that their flaws too could bloom into something beautiful. The young woman who had taken the pots into her home continued to care for them with love. She often told her children the story of the farmer. Each time she spoke of him, her voice carried warmth and admiration. "Remember," she would say, "you don't have to be perfect to do something good. Sometimes the cracks in your heart are exactly where the light comes through." Her children listened with wide eyes, fascinated by the story of how one humble pot had filled the world with flowers. Years later, the woman's eldest daughter grew up and became a teacher. On her first day of school, she stood before her students and began with a story not from a book, but from her heart. She told them about the old farmer, the perfect pot, and the cracked pot. The classroom was silent as the children listened, their imaginations painting pictures of dusty paths, blooming flowers, and a gentle farmer with a wise smile. When she finished, a small boy raised his hand. "Teacher," he said shyly, "I think I'm like the cracked pot. I make mistakes a lot." The teacher smiled gently. "That's perfectly all right," she replied. "Even if you make mistakes, you can still make something beautiful. Sometimes your kindness, your laughter, or your courage might be the water that helps someone else grow." The boy's face brightened, and the lesson stayed with him for many years. And so generation after generation, the story continued to spread across villages, across lands, and even across time. The cracked pot's life, once filled with shame, had become a story that changed hearts. It reminded everyone who heard it that true worth is not found in perfection, but in purpose. One spring morning, many years later, the young woman, now old herself, walked along the same path the farmer had once traveled. She carried the cracked pot carefully in her hands. The flowers that lined the road still bloomed as beautifully as ever, filling the air with fragrance. She paused near the old well, looked at the pot, and whispered softly, "You've carried more than water in your life, my friend. You've carried a message of hope." The wind stirred the petals around her as if answering back. She smiled, placed the cracked pot beside the well where it belonged, and walked home slowly, feeling grateful for the quiet lessons of life. The cracked pot sat there, warmed by the sunlight, its shadow stretching softly across the ground. Though time had worn it thin, it felt full of memories of love, of purpose. It realized that even though the farmer was long gone, his spirit still lived on through the kindness he had shared. The pot had not only watered flowers but also hearts, reminding everyone that every drop of effort, no matter how small, could bring light to the world. Friends, in our lives, we all have cracks. We all have moments when we feel weak, unworthy, or broken. But sometimes it is through those very cracks that we bring beauty to others. The love you give, the patience you show, and the kindness you offer, all these small acts, can bloom like flowers along the paths of life. So the next time you see your flaws, remember the cracked pot. Remember that what makes you different might be exactly what makes the world brighter. Thank you for listening to this story on Learn English with Sara. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories to help you learn English with meaning and emotion. And don't forget to comment below. Tell us what lesson you learned from this story. See you next time on Learn English with Sara, where every story teaches more than just English, it teaches life.